Hello, everybody. This is Craig Evans of Autism Hangout, and thank you for tuning in to the Ask Dr. Tony series, where everybody's favorite autism and Asperger's expert, Dr. Tony Attwood, addresses our questions about autism. Now, in this installment, Dr. Tony is going to be talking specifically about girls with Asperger syndrome. So welcome, Dr. Tony. Nice to have you here.
Nice to be there, Craig, and for all this technology to be working at last.
Oh, how about that? I mean, thank you for Skype tonight. It's working really well. All right, Dr. Tony, globally, the statistics are that for every 4 boys that are born with autism, there's 1 girl. Now, is this observation still accurate?
No, I don't think it is. When it comes to Asperger syndrome, we find that the girls are very good at camouflaging their social confusion, hiding in a group, and making sure that they don't get noticed. If you look very carefully, then I think the ratio is actually probably about 2 to 1.
Interesting. Okay. Now, that's based on your observations over there in Australia or globally?
Globally, we're picking that up, but also we're noticing that at the clinic we have here in Brisbane, it's for both children and adults. Mm-hmm. And in our adult groups, the ratio is about 2 to 1. And these are women who, with maturity, have recognized that they've always been different and have finally had the confidence to go and check this out. Or they've had a child themselves with autism and Asperger syndrome. Mm-hmm. So I think from that alternative pathway that the ratio is probably about 2 to 1.
The first question comes from Rudy Simone. Now, Rudy is the author of 22 Things a Woman Must Know If She's in Love with a Man with Asperger Syndrome, and also Asperger's in the Workplace. And Rudy herself is a person on the spectrum. And her question is there any special training today that's being provided to psychologists and psychiatrists and doctors to help them in recognizing AS in women, which so often goes undiagnosed for a while?
Well, thanks. First of all, a message to Rudy that her book on 22 Things a Woman Must Know If She's in Love with a Man with Asperger's is excellent. I found it really good. The actual training is, very little is actually done on girls and women with Asperger's syndrome. In my presentations, I nearly always have a section so that those in the audience who are listening to my descriptions of Asperger's, I always illustrate it with components for girls. But when we look at the various ways that girls may be picked up, it may not be until they're in their teenage years that they're identified, perhaps with a secondary disorder such as anorexia nervosa, depression, obsessive-compulsive disorder, etc. And when a full developmental history is taken, we recognize that there is indeed Asperger's syndrome, but it may not be until they're in their teens or early 20s with difficulties with relationships, etc., that we identify that they're there. But sometimes the professionals seeing them are not necessarily professionals in autism and Asperger's syndrome. My friend and colleague Michelle Garnett and I, a few weeks ago, did or contributed to a workshop over 2 days specifically for girls and women with Asperger's syndrome here in Brisbane. And we did go through some of the specific aspects, but the most important part of the presentation was for descriptions by women with Asperger's syndrome of their childhood and how they hid in various groups. They were bullied and teased and tormented, but never came to the attention of the authorities. Now, that workshop went down extremely well, and I'm hoping in the USA and other countries in the future to do a one-day workshop specifically on girls and women with Asperger's syndrome, and I think that would be very well received by people.
Oh, definitely. In fact, that's encouraging just to hear that people are already putting together conferences around this information because everybody knows it needs to be disseminated. All right, let's move on. Dr. Tony, from your experience, what should parents focus on for their school-age girls to become productive adults and a part of the community? And by the way, this is from author Anne Malam, the author of Believe in the Future How.
Well, we've got some very good questions here. For school-age girls, one of the difficulties is going to be the bullying and teasing from other girls, which can be horrendous with regard to self-esteem. There can be issues with regard to fashion, makeup, boyfriend-girlfriend relationships, etc. The social world of girls is far more intense than boys, and if you're confused in that environment, it's going to affect your self-esteem and self-identity in quite tragic ways. So my concern is that we need to work with the peer group to identify one or two girls who may be supportive. And one of the things I found is that sometimes the girl with Asperger's can have one friend, maybe only one friend at a time. That's all they can cope with. But with that one friend, they provide guidance and support and protection from some of the predators. So my view is we need to work with the peer group for acceptance and also a buddy system.
You know, that segues really nicely into this next question from Lydia, who's known as Lassie on Autism Hangout. And she has a daughter, 17-year-old daughter named Anna. And she says, how can girls with Asperger's syndrome develop better friendships?
I think they need to learn, but most of the social skills groups and activities are for boys. So when we've in the past had social skills groups, the girl has been in a minority and has felt as such. I think that they really need an opportunity to meet other girls, to make friends with some other girls with Asperger's syndrome because they understand each other, but also to have someone who can provide that degree of guidance that they need in a professional capacity. So at our Minds and Hearts clinic, we've now started girls groups that specifically focus on the girls to go through the issues that they face at elementary, junior high, and high school.
Are these initially pulled together, Dr. Tony, as social groups, or are they more academic groups?
They're really social groups. They're to help understand about friendships, develop issues of self-esteem, etc. In part, we focus on whatever the participants in the group want to focus on. Each group is unique and composed of unique individuals. We can't determine exactly what we're going to go through. So what we tend to do is say, okay guys, what are your issues and problems? What can we do to help?
Mm-hmm. Are the parents instrumental in organizing these group functions as well?
Yes, my colleagues organise them, and if they're going to be successful, it needs to be information that's passed on to parents too, and then subsequently to schools as well. It's just that the girls are prone to become very self-absorbed. They may either become depressed or escape into imagination with imaginary friends, reading fiction. And by being no trouble, that person is absorbed in their imagination or their books, that they're often overlooked.
Let's go back to one more question from from Anne Milan. How are women with Asperger's fitting into the employment arena?
Marvelously. It depends on what you want to do. There are some jobs that are more likely for girls and women with Asperger's that ranges from librarianship, but also includes teaching. That is, teaching in special education and early childhood can be exceptionally talented in that area. But I also know a number of women with Asperger's syndrome who have been very determined to become counsellors, either social workers or psychologists, and exploring Asperger's syndrome and actually being counsellors to what I would call members of their own culture to help them in a variety of ways. So taking degrees in the caring professions and then becoming a specialist in Asperger's. I think that's a great idea.
Well, that's a wonderful suggestion. And in the case of Anna, Anna is a very talented, very bright young girl. This would be a possible career path for her. Okay, Dr. Tony, that's all the questions I have for today. I would like to ask you, though, please, as soon as you decide whether or not to come to America to present an entire curriculum on girls with Asperger's syndrome, that you'd let us know, because I think we will be able to spread past, or at least help pass the word here at Autism Hangout.
Thanks, Craig. Future Horizons organise my workshops in the USA, and I'm trying to persuade them, and if other people can contact Future Horizons to say it would be worthwhile.
Dr. Tony, thank you for coming in today and giving us your wisdom. We certainly appreciate it here.
Thanks, Craig.
And I'll be talking to you again soon. Folks from Autism Hangout, thank you for tuning in. I'll be back soon with another special report. Hi, there's one more thing. Dr. Tony and I were talking right before he hung up, and he was telling me that videotape highlights of that conference in Australia on girls with autism is soon going to be made available publicly. And if you would like to find those tapes or possibly look at those tapes, the website will be www.asperger.asn.org. So he was very impressed with this conference. So tune in, see what you can learn, and come on back and share that with the rest of us here at Autism Hangout.